For more on China's relationship with Venezuela, CCTV's Philip Yin sat down with Margaret Myers. She's the Inter-American Dialogue's China and Latin America Program Director. Phil began by asking her what impact Venezuela's recent political changes would have on China ties.
It's a big development. It's an important one. It's considered to be a victory for democracy, certainly in Venezuela and more broadly in the region. But in terms of the effect on the China-Venezuela relationship, I think that's going to be rather minimal. Whether it's the opposition that's eventually in power, if that ever happens, or it continues to be a Chavista government, China is and will continue to be a critical partner, economically speaking, for Venezuela. They simply can't afford to bite the hand that feeds them, that's what the role that China has played now for many, many years, since 2005, more or less.
The issue with China and Venezuela, a lot of people don't quite understand the importance of that relationship, but walk us through, why does China want to help Venezuela so much? What does China get out of that?
I mean, when you're looking at China's role in Latin America broadly, it's best to think about it in terms of China's own energy security and food security considerations. And Venezuela obviously factors into the energy security concerns that China has. And that's why China's there. Venezuela has a tremendous amount of reserves, and China's interested in acquiring access to those by means of oil-backed lending, through investments in Venezuela's major oil company, PDVSA, and by other means as well. But certainly, you know, in China there are plenty of people who are supportive of being in Venezuela, even though it's a little bit risky from time to time, or a lot risky from time to time now. But also those who think it's a really bad idea because the political risk is so high, and they've been very vocal about that. So it's not as though, you know, there's one sort of idea in Beijing about going ahead into Venezuela, and that's widely supported.
Do you think they're employing the correct strategy given the economic situation in Venezuela right now?
I think China has decided to, year after year, support Venezuela by means primarily of multi-billion-dollar loans. They've given at this point, since 2005, more than $50 billion in loans to Venezuela. Some of that's been paid back already. Other loans have not yet been paid back in oil. And every year we ask, you know, will China continue to give more money to Venezuela despite a rapidly deteriorating political situation? And every year the answer is yes. In 2015, China committed another $10 billion to Venezuela. And in 2015, as we all know, the situation was not a positive one.
But I don't hear you saying this is the right strategy.
Personally, I think it's a very risky strategy. I think there's plenty of possibility of default on these loans moving ahead, and there is also the great possibility that this change in Congress, where we now see the opposition in the majority, could result in positive developments, but it could also result in a devolution of the political situation and considerable instability, and that would be very, very bad for China.
So, okay, so that's China's side. What about from Venezuela's standpoint? What does Venezuela get out of this relationship besides the obvious money?
Liquidity, essentially. Venezuela does not have access to international credit markets. They can't go to the World Bank and say, you know, we need $5 billion for infrastructure development. We need, you know, money for any number of projects, or just to prop up the country in general. But China has been willing to provide that to Venezuela, also to other countries in the region that have had more limited access to international credit. Ecuador, for example, Argentina. But Venezuela has been the primary beneficiary when we're talking about finance, Chinese finance.
Do you feel more optimistic or less optimistic about the future for Venezuela?
I feel more optimistic. I think this is a tremendous success for Venezuela and for democracy in the region overall. But so much remains to be done and remains to be seen. There's a lot of work that Venezuelans on both sides of the aisle are going to have to do to make this positive result.